Secrets of Wysteria and Why This Song Shouldn't Exist. Before we begin this project, I'd like to offer a disclaimer. We will be discussing a gruesome true crime story and its ramifications in detail. Some may find this content disturbing. Therefore, viewer discretion is strongly advised. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. If you're like me, then you've most likely heard of the widely popular horror song by SteamPianist called Secrets of Wysteria. Whether you came upon it by accident or had someone recommend it to you so that you could dip your feet in the pool of terror it's created, its disturbing nature is still completely undeniable. From the haunting vocals, to the eerie visuals, to the reversed message that plays at the end. From start to finish, it's a dark and twisted journey, outlining a tragic tale. But I'm not here to talk about this song alone. No. Rather, I'm here to talk about why I feel like it shouldn't exist at all. Now, before I continue, I want to go ahead and preface this message by saying that I am a fan of SteamPianist, and I do indeed enjoy a lot of their work. Their music is definitely unique, and I find a lot of their songs to be incredibly interesting and enjoyable to listen to. But I believe that this song specifically can be accused of pushing the envelope when it comes to creating something that's hauntingly realistic, while offering it to viewers as a means of entertainment. Now, if I've lost you, then maybe you're like many and simply listened to this song and took it at face value as an unsettling tune focused around a few scary elements without much else to deepen the eerie atmosphere. If that is you, then I'm gonna have to apologize now, because this song has more hidden beneath its surface than one might think, and we're about to expose that. Because it's not just a fictional song depicting unfortunate characters, but rather a verbal recounting of a gruesome murder and the man behind it all. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let's go back and just outline what's going on during the song's runtime. We open to a dismal scene, where you can clearly see a young girl crouching in the center of a darkened hole. Then, we're shown an eerie trio of black, bleeding heads ascending from a small, darkened shack that's seemingly placed in the middle of nowhere. After that, the story begins to unfold. We find out that the young girl depicted in the intro is named Gracie, or Grace, to be more accurate, and that she found a strange house in the woods where she spent her time playing as she passed the hours. I won't directly outline exactly what the next few lines depict, but the physical harm, pain, and horror are startlingly real and forward in presentation, indicating that Grace met and befriended an anonymous man referred to simply as he, and began to discover the sinister things that he did in the desolate shack in the woods. The chorus is then introduced, while the vocalist sings the sentence, "Phantasmagorical Willows of Wysteria." The word phantasmagorical is an adjective, and the definition is having a fantastic or deceptive appearance. And since willows, a normally peaceful-looking tree, have been termed this way, we can see the singer's perception of the space slowly beginning to change as reality sets in. Shortly thereafter, we see a tall man holding the hand of a young girl, which I assume to be Grace, which then cuts to a scene where she is pictured with her eyes blacked out, as if she saw something that she didn't want to, or was somehow forced to look away. From there, the song continues to darken, talking about children having gone astray, and how they now finally rest in the soil beneath, their bodies in total disarray. Once that ends, we're presented with a set of dates and a few ominous lines about Grace and the other children. As the song draws nearer to its close, we're given a clear picture of more harm having come to the unnamed children, and the visuals shift back to Grace, who seems to be hiding in an attempt to preserve her life, playing what the song terms as the gray man's game, which is tied to what we're only told has something to do with cleavers. Then, the chorus is repeated once again, followed up by what sounds like a child singing on in a haunting voice. But before the song is finished, we're given one last scare in the form of various lines being played in reverse, while we're shown a scene where two children's shoes are lying askance in the grass, their owner having disappeared without a trace. Moments later, her pale, pain-distorted face is shown for a few frames. Then, the song is over. At face value, this is what seems to be a wonderfully frightening song, and in fact, when I first heard it, I was completely captured by its eerie nature. It's not often that a song can truly transport you into a place as deep and dark as Secrets of Wysteria. At the time in which I'd heard it, I didn't even know what the reversed audio was saying, and in fact, I didn't really care. Part of the haunting quality of the whole experience was not knowing what was being said. I was young and relatively shallow, so I really didn't find any issue with it at all at the time. But that was a dangerous stance on my part, because not only is the ending an important part of the song, but this song isn't just a dark story cooked up in the mind of someone who enjoys horror. It's much, much more. In fact, it's actually based on a true, real-life crime, its victim, her murderer, and the horrible way that he included her family in his twisted wrongdoings. Now that I've outlined what went on in the song, let's dive into the real story of Grace Budd and her murderer, known by the names of the Gray Man, the Boogeyman, and the Moon Maniac, Albert Fish. I don't want in any way to glorify the murderer or what he did leading up to his last days, so I'm not going to outline his life, his eccentricities, or even his history. I'm only going to touch on what he did in relation to the song, how things ended, and what was involved in the aftermath of his crimes. Albert Fish, who was known by many sick nicknames as mentioned above, has been regarded as one of America's most disturbed murderers. While the song itself doesn't offer specifics, it's thought that Fish murdered and dismembered as many as 10 children in the 1900s and consumed what was left of their bodies. However, it wasn't until 1928 that Grace Budd, the main character in the song, would enter his life and become one of his victims. The song is called Secrets of Wysteria to pay homage to the place in which the last murder was carried out, a Wysteria cottage located in Westchester County in New York. Without going into too much detail, he met and misled Grace's parents, claiming he was taking her to his niece's birthday party. Then, he led her to his abandoned cabin, murdered her, and methodically dismembered of her body, cooking and consuming her body over the span of at least 9 days. He truly was a very perverse, disturbed, and highly dangerous person, having made certain harmful practices commonplace in his home and life. The song describes him very briefly, but the line, "Swift sharp needles do spot his face," is referring to one of these practices. Fish reportedly enjoyed the pain that came with physical harm, and often pushed needles into his own body, speaking levels about just how twisted his mind really was. That aside, he was also obsessively interested in cannibalism, and was noted to have written about it extensively. If this doesn't paint an accurate picture of who he was, then I don't know what will. But in my mind, that wasn't the worst part of what he'd come to find acceptable. 6 years after the unsolved murder of Grace Budd, Fish wrote a letter to her mother, outlining just how she was murdered and what he did with her body in the days to follow. It was this letter that was traced back to Fish, which eventually led to his capture and incarceration at the age of 66. And he was then consequently charged with various crimes. Although the jury did unanimously agree that Fish was indeed insane, he was sentenced to death nevertheless, and met that fate in the electric chair. So, why is this song one that I wish didn't exist? Honestly, there are a lot of reasons, but today I'm just going to outline the most important ones. 1. The what. I'm not saying that songs can't be written about true crime, but one has to be extremely careful when towing the line between recounting a series of events and glorifying what the killer did. If this song had remained somewhat poetic in just outlining what happened, while still maintaining a certain distance, I might not have as much of an issue with it. It could still be seen as an artistic expression recounting brief details of a dismal story. But in my mind, this song crossed the line when it included one key piece of information: Fish's letter. The reversed lyrics in the end aren't really lyrics at all, but rather a man reading parts of the letter written by Fish to Grace's mother. When I figured this out, I was immediately disturbed. After all, since finding the song, I'd included it in one of my playlists and had listened to it multiple times while writing a mystery novel I'd been working on. I'd used it to set the mood, not having known that the last minute or so was more grim than the rest of the song could ever be. I would not advise looking up the lyrics, as they're incredibly disturbing and detailed. But, in short, they outlined just what Fish did with poor Grace's body and how he prepared her before consumption. That's followed up by the Vocaloid used in this song, singing other haunting tidbits, but the real horror-inducing portion is played at the beginning. 2. The why. I've asked myself many times why this song included such a dark ending, and still have yet to come up with an answer that is in any regard satisfying. A project created for awareness is one thing, and while some could argue that this song was made for that intention, it's a bit of a stretch. Now, once again, I may have been able to excuse what I was hearing if the song hadn't ended the way that it did, but that's a clear fact that's so upfront and honest that it's hard to miss. Now, I could argue that SteamPianist reversed the lyrics to obscure them somewhat, since they are truly so disturbing, but if that was the case, I believe it backfired. Most people hear the reversed lyrics and immediately want to know what's being said, so they go, look them up, and realize what exactly they've been listening to. I, for one, was shocked and saddened when I realized exactly what was being said and what it was related to. And that brings me to my third point. 3. This isn't okay. So why do I now not condone sharing or leisurely listening to this song? Well, if you've been following along with my rant so far, you'll have a fair idea. But let me just add some more context. Imagine you were a mother whose daughter was torn from her arms at a young age, tortured, murdered, dismembered, and then eaten. Imagine that after years of horror and heartache, you receive a letter that shatters your world once again, written by the deranged monster who tore apart your own flesh and blood, and then decided to recount the tragic circumstances as a final act of pure evil. That alone is traumatizing and life-changing. But now, flip that circumstance around. Many years later, imagine someone writing a song about that horrible day, including the direct name of your child, and even highlighting the horrific letter written about her demise. Honestly, when looking at it this way, I feel physically sick. If that were my daughter, I'd be horrified. Yet here we are many years later, singing, sharing, and obsessing over a song which gives more attention to the display of a twisted message from a murderer than to the poor fate of the young girl involved. I'm all for sharing hard-to-talk-about stories artfully through music, and there are many artists who can do this incredibly well. In fact, if I were to mention one, Babu Chan often creates thought-provoking pieces like this, while maintaining distance and anonymity in doing so. But this song and its climactic ending are so bold-faced that they're impossible to miss. Not only is the killer's sickening letter included, but it's presented in a way that encourages viewers to dive deeper into what he said versus Grace's story or the case altogether. I could go on about this song for a while, but I'd just be rehashing different versions of the same point. I'd urge you to look at this piece from the perspective of someone involved and ask yourself whether you'd be okay with the song if you had connections or ties to the story it outlined. I know personally I wouldn't. Therefore, it's songs like this that really rub me the wrong way and cause my heart to break for the family involved. If this were my story and I was related to someone who'd been murdered, the last thing I'd want is for someone to create a song that highlighted the fateful and disturbing letter connected to the case, with content so horrifying that it was redacted from most crime documentaries featuring the story. What a horrifying thought. In closing, I'd like to offer my condolences to the family and those involved. Even though this case took place many years ago and most involved are no longer alive, I wouldn't feel right creating a project like this without mentioning that at some point. This song needs to be spoken about. Most people with videos related to this song tend to either react to it, explain the story behind it, or just showcase it in an attempt to frighten others. But instead of doing that, I wanted to target the major flaws in its creation, and hopefully change the minds of those who've listened to it leisurely, or even have it in their playlists like I once did. Just like the disturbingly growing number of fans who romanticize murderers on TikTok, this song shouldn't become hallowed, and the murderer's letter shouldn't be highlighted in an openly theatrical but irreverent fashion. I hope in some way that my breakdown of this song will change a few minds and give the entire tune a more realistic ring. It's haunting and disturbing because of its real roots, and it should be treated as such, not simply a horror-style song uplifting the most gruesome portion of the case it reflects. Rest in peace, Grace. This project is for you. Hi everyone, thank you for making it to the end of this video. I've considered making this a series by the name of Twisted Music, where I go through songs that are disturbing, break them down, and study their roots in an attempt to bring meaning and clarity to their messages, or to call them out for what they are and what they represent. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please leave me a comment below. Alright guys, as always, I love you all and stay awesome.